What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Saturday, August 21st.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 6-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Joe Musgrove with a 7% pitching advantage over the Philadelphia Phillies. Joe Musgrove is only giving up a .653 OPS to lefties and a .663 OPS to righties, and he's facing 4 lefties and 5 righties. On top of that, the Phillies have only hit 10 of his last 50 pitches. That's a .200 batting average. He's $9,400 FanDuel salary, $300 less on DraftKings, projected at 27.1 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 3.11. His record is 8-8 on the season, pitching an average of 70 pitches per game, averaging 26 fantasy points per game. He scored 9, 0, and 49 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Joe Musgrove here versus the Philadelphia Phillies. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Joey Votto with a 66% batting advantage over Zach Thompson. Joey Votto bats 28% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .955 OPS versus righties. And Zach Thompson, he pitches his worst ball by far to lefty batters, 38% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .830 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus Thompson yet, and Joey Votto is $4,100 FanDuel salary, projected at 10.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 13 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 25, 26, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Joey Votto here versus Zach Thompson. Okay, now I also like Carson Kelly with an 8% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Kyle Freeland. Carson Kelly is batting a .774 OPS versus lefties, so he bats 9% better versus lefties as he does righties, and Kyle Freeland is giving up a .788 OPS versus righties. I like this pick because Carson Kelly is 3 for 9 with a .333 batting average and a 1.5 OPS versus Freeland. 2 of those 3 hits were for home runs. He's $3,600 FanDuel salary, $1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 7, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And I like this pick because Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 12 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Carson Kelly here versus Kyle Freeland. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Ketel Marte with a 57% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Kyle Freeland. Ketel Marte is batting 44% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.204 OPS versus lefties, and Kyle Freeland, he pitches his worst ball versus switch hitters, 13% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .912 OPS versus switch hitters. Ketel Marte is 8 for 26, batting a .308 batting average and a .976 OPS versus Freeland. He's $4,400 FanDuel salary, but he's only $600 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. he scored 28, 9, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 12 runs scored in this game, so this is a good game to stack. So I like Ketel Marte here versus Kyle Freeland.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on.
Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, now here's a value play for you on FanDuel. Take a look at Mike Moustakas with a 73% batting advantage over Zach Thompson. Mike Moustakas is batting 35% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .800 OPS versus righties. And we know Zach Thompson throws his worst ball versus lefty batters, 38% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .830 OPS versus lefties. And Mike Moustakas is only $2,300 FanDuel salary, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. Now, he's been in a slump, only scoring 0, 3, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but the price is right and the splits are good, so I like Mike Moustakas here versus Zach Thompson. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Austin Riley with a 21% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Matt Harvey. Austin Riley is batting 8% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .825 OPS versus righties. And Matt Harvey, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 13% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a 1.078 OPS versus righties. Now there's no at-bats versus Harvey yet, and Austin Riley is $4,100 FanDuel salary, $1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 25, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Austin Riley here versus Matt Harvey. I also like Rafael Devers with a 14% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Jordan Lyles. Rafael Devers is batting 22% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .924 OPS versus righties, and Jordan Lyles is giving up a .819 OPS versus lefties. Rafael Devers is 1 for 2 with a 1.5 OPS versus Lyles. He's $4,200 FanDuel salary, $1,800 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season, and he's been in a slump, scoring 0, 0, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I think it's a good bounce back game for him here tonight. Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Rafael Devers here versus Jordan Lyles. Okay, I also like Cabrian Hayes with a 37% batting advantage over J.A. Happ. Cabrian Hayes is batting 13% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .994 OPS versus lefties, and J.A. Happ, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 24% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .849 OPS versus righties. Now, Cabrian Hayes is 0 for 2 versus Happ, but he's only $2,900 FanDuel salary. He's $1,400 more on DraftKings, projected at 11.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 0, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Cabrian Hayes here versus J.A. Happ. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I like Jean Segura batting against Joe Musgrove. Now, this is only if you're not going to be playing Joe Musgrove as your pitcher, but Jean Segura, he's batting a .760 OPS versus righty pitchers, and Joe Musgrove is giving up a .663 OPS versus righties. But the reason I like this pick is because Jean Segura is 5 for 13, batting a .385 batting average and a .814 OPS versus Musgrove. He's $2,900 FanDuel salary, $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight, and he scored 27, 10, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jean Segura here versus Joe Musgrove. Okay, now I have a value play for you. I like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa with a 4% batting advantage over Eduardo Rodriguez. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, he's batting 10% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .733 OPS versus lefties, and Eduardo Rodriguez is giving up a .745 OPS versus righties. And I like this pick because Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is 4 for 10 with a 1.155 OPS versus Rodriguez. And he's only $2,700 FanDuel salary and only $900 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 6, and 9 fantasy points in his last 3 games. Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game, so I like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa here versus Eduardo Rodriguez. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like Trey Mancini with a 53% batting advantage over Drew Smyly. Trey Mancini is batting 25% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .922 OPS versus lefties. And Drew Smyly, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 27% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .757 OPS versus righties. Now, there's no at-bats versus Smyly yet, and Trey Mancini is $3,100 FanDuel salary, $1,800 more on DraftKings, projected at 11 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 0, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Trey Mancini here versus Drew Smyly. And I also like Charlie Blackmon batting against Zach Gallen. Charlie Blackmon is batting a .731 OPS versus righties, and Zach Gallen is giving up a .673 OPS versus lefties. So the splits aren't great here, but what I like about this pick is that Charlie Blackmon is 7 for 12, batting a .583 batting average and a 1.393 OPS versus Gallen. He's $4,000 FanDuel salary, $800 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season, and he's been on fire, scoring 10, 19, and 26 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 12 runs scored in this game, so this is another good game to stack. So I like Charlie Blackmon here versus Zach Gallen.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.